Well, Bob Harris is on assignment, so Daniel, you're going to pick up the slack for me here. Because Bob's a slacker anyway, and we'll wish a happy birthday to his mom and dad, who he's going out there to visit. Who are his dad still probably could kick my ass, but With that said, it's a Chiefs day with feel it or fuck it, because my dog ate my Ravens hat and decided to leave the Chiefs hats and Browns hats alone. So who better than to ask you? I just got to know. Feel it or fuck it. Rashee Rice, is he an instant impact producer in Kansas City? Defining that by like over 600 yards receiving. What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, so I'm going to lead this off with a big old fuck it, because I think we all understand that in Andy Reid's offense, the very first season for these rookies, especially, I try to stress this. Coming out last year with Skyy Moore, you have to understand smaller school wide receivers coming into the NFL. It's not just a normal jump from your Power 5 schools, from offenses they're running into Andy Reid's. Even then, McCole Hardman, his route tree at Georgia was undefined. It doesn't have this whole different reading of the secondary and reading of the coverages and zone coverages and understanding where you're supposed to break and all the different things you can do based off of the leverage of the corner. So Skyy Moore had 200 plus yards last year. Granted, he was rotating as like the wide receiver 5 or 4. So yeah, no, I can't be on board with it. I wasn't on board with everyone hyping up Skyy Moore last year when you figured everything that was coming into Kansas City with all the veterans that Andy Reid brought in. You just couldn't do that, and you still have a plethora of people, MVS, Tony, who they expect to be the number 1 wide receiver this year. They do believe it. They absolutely do. Skyy Moore, Travis Kelce. There's even McKinnon. Last year, he was a running back 1 down the stretch because he was getting tons and tons of receiving production. He's probably going to be doing that again this year. So I like Rashee. I think he could be a good player. We have a lot to determine of what he is mentally in learning a brand new offensive scheme.
Yeah, see, I think that's great, because when I look at it, even before you even look at the film, you just look at the fantasy perspective from the past several years with Andy Reid's offense. It's like, I see this over and over again, beginning with, like you mentioned, Mecole Hardman, when everybody was like, "Oh, you got to get a piece of the Kansas City Chiefs offense." Yeah, it's not a 6 or 8 or 10 piece pizza pie. It's literally 3 slices, and in the passing offense, essentially, and that's been Kelce, the wide receiver 1, and last year it was Juju and Kelce. The years before, we know Tyreek and Kelce. Mecole Hardman's never, he's been that baby. He's been that piece of cheese and the topping that's been left over in the box, for fantasy people. So I appreciate hearing that. But so with that said, do we see any progress from Skyy Moore this year, where we say he could potentially maybe work his way into being an extra piece in this pie?
Yeah, I actually just did a Skyy Moore film review on rgrfootball.com going into his whole last year. I went through 7 games. I charted all of his routes. And funny enough, he was actually the top graded blocking wide receiver in Kansas City last year, based on 200 plus snaps of him blocking. Weird thing to have. And Andy Reid, that's what he was doing. He was really kind of trying to figure out what Skyy Moore was good at. He was running as a focal point for wide receiver screens. He was blocking. He was doing jet sweeps. He was being a wide receiver screen player himself, and he was doing some of the adjustments on his routes. Like if you go back to the Rams game from last year, there's a play where the Rams come out in a 2-high shell, and they show the corner who's kind of pressing up on Skyy Moore a little bit. Everyone's just running out routes. All 4 wide receivers across: Travis Kelce, Justin Watson, Skyy Moore. But based off the leverage of the corner, you have the ability to go vertical, because if he presses you, but then he flips around and looks at the quarterback, that allows them to then go up the field. So Skyy Moore is the only one that gets a little bit of a bump. So you have him reading that, feeling it, and understanding that he's now sitting in between this underneath flat defender and a safety. And he goes vertical. Patrick Mahomes finds it, identifies it, throws it up, and then he goes catches the ball away from his frame with his hands. That's what I love. That's one of the biggest things that I took away from his film review, is that he was learning how to read a defense and understand the coverage as it changes in front of him, and how Patrick needs to see it too. So I am on board with him being a bigger part of this offense in 2023, mostly because if we look at what Juju Smith-Schuster did last year, a lot of the getting in and out of the zones that he was doing, the tough yards after the catch, that's exactly what Skyy Moore can do right now. He was still not great against zone last year, so we have to see his OTAs, his training camp, see how mentally he's reading defenses. But one thing that he's going to do is give you tough yards after the catch, and he still is a fast guy. He's not uber fast. He's not got that burst. But I think we're going to see close to 600, 700 yard, I think, floor-ish for him. And I think he can get 4 to 5 touchdowns this year based off of what they are going to do in the offense. So I think he's going to have a better year based off of everything that I saw last year and the growth that we expect going into his second year.
Yeah, I like that. And certainly Andy Reid, I think, tends to be patient with his youth in terms of giving them opportunities to develop over time. But that said, would it be also wise to say that Richie James is the hedge in case Skyy Moore and Rashee Rice don't develop fast, and that if there's a sneaky, productive guy for this offense, it would be James?
I would like to say yes, but then the return of Justin Watson is here, and Justin Watson played a ton of starting role snaps for this offense in the middle of the season when guys were injured. And Andy Reid, if there's one fault I have on him sometimes, is that he gets very comfortable with veterans in his offense. DeMarcus Robinson was one of the staples of the Kansas City Chiefs offense. He was like the double move guy that did everything for wanting to block and just knew the offense in and out. So Andy Reid kind of went back to him a lot. I think with the return of Justin Watson, if Skyy Moore and Rashee Rice aren't getting it up to speed, even to an extent, Kadarius Toney, because he's still, coming out of Florida, was a raw player going into the Giants, 2 different offensive systems, and they didn't really want to deal with it. He's still learning Andy Reid's offense, even though the terminology to an extent is going to be similar to what you're seeing from a Mike Kafka and I can see his face and I'm just blanking on.
That's okay.
Yeah, the Buffalo Bill, who used to be the offensive coordinator, who's now the head coach in New York.
Sure. Dable.
Yeah, exactly. They're Brian Dable. Their offensive schemes kind of touch a little bit. They've all kind of worked with each other at some point in time. But I do think that while Richie James offers more of a safety net, because last year when everything hit the fan, especially in the AFC Championship game, you had injuries. You had Skyy Moore out there, and even Emir Smith-Marset was playing snaps for them at some point, and that's not necessarily where you want to be. So I think Richie's more of a break glass in case of emergency rotational player, but a more of a return competition guy, because he's going to come in, maybe take that off the plate of Skyy Moore, who we saw struggle most of the season last year. I don't think they want Kadarius Toney returning punts with everything that you want to do. You want him focused on playing wide receiver. You want Skyy Moore focused on playing wide receiver. So Richie James will have that. A veteran guy who knows the offense, who has the terminology, playing for Mike Kafka last year, comes in to Andy Reid's offense as a return guy, but also a good depth piece. And I think that if anything were to happen, a veteran guy that needs to step in, I think it would be Justin Watson over Richie James. But you never know.
Yeah, that's a good thought. My argument maybe for Richie James is in the same argument that one would have for Justin Watson, is that Watson and Mahomes worked out together. Mahomes liked him, lobbied or gave his stamp of approval to have Watson join the team. But I remember when Mahomes was coming out in the draft, that one of his offseason workout guys, and I don't know if they did more of that, was Richie James.
Yeah.
So the thing about Richie that I've always liked is that he can probably give you a flanker work if you need it. He can give you slot work if you need it, and certainly the return game. So there's a number of opportunities for him to be there in that regard. But I get where you're coming from with Watson. Watson is bigger. He's also I think Watson's bigger, maybe a little faster.
Probably.
On that end, but. I think they're loaded. I think if you ask me, with depth, even if it's not like high-end players abound, I think they have really competent players.
I still think the sneaky guy to produce this year is Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I really do. And you go back last year, he and Mahomes missed on 4 deep, wide open touchdowns. They were wide open. If he hits those, even 2 of them, where people are probably talking more about Marquez in this offense, but with them consistently saying that Kadarius Toney is their number 1 wide receiver and the offense still funnels through Travis Kelce, I think this could be a year where Marquez maybe has his best statistical season ever. I really believe that's possible.
So So the crusty old pessimistic dude in me says fuck that because
me too, because I hate his skill set.
Because he's such a tease. He's been such a tease for so long. But honestly, the part that stays young in me and that I still repeated, I still want to. I'm like, okay, yeah, we'll give it another year, you know. So
always,
yeah. How about Clyde Edwards-Helaire? Is there something left in the tank with this guy? He's been banged up so much. You know, a guy like Jay Moyer's talked about. I think he's done maybe physically, and maybe that's going to be. It's tough for him to ever see what people wanted to see from him, you know, to begin his career at LSU.
Yeah, I think part of the problem with Clyde is the usage. I think that the Chiefs maybe put him in their box, not wanting him to be what he was at LSU because he didn't get a ton of those targets. There was a play in his rookie season against the Chargers, the second game of the season, where he's 25, 30 yards down the field, and he goes up and boxes out the defender, turning around in the air, makes a catch. Not once do we see him do a wheel route out of the backfield since that play. Not once. That bothers me. Like that kind of stuff bothers me. Last year, he was actually first 5 games of the season, he was scoring touchdowns at kind of an alarming rate. Everyone's like, what's going on here? He was very, very efficient. And then you start to see the injuries pile up. Isaiah Pacheco gets more touches. I think that his best role is a rotational back, obviously, in this backfield now of 3 guys who could end up all not playing at some point next year with injuries. I don't know. I know that Isaiah Pacheco's playing style leads to injuries. He's more of an upright runner. We know Clyde's been banged up all of his career. You know, even Jerick McKinnon has been beat up a lot of his time before Kansas City. So I have always been a believer in Clyde's skill set, because if you let him do what he does well, which is run between the tackles, the big problem for him is that he's too patient in the NFL. He could be more patient at LSU, where he, you know, could set those linebackers up sometimes. You see a hole here, but you're like, no, if I take a second or half a second and set this linebacker up, I'll have a bigger hole down maybe the left side. He doesn't have time to do that in the NFL, and he still thinks he does at times. And you'll see him just sit there in a hole trying to set up a linebacker to get maybe an extra 5 yards when you got to hit these holes. And he doesn't have, you know, speed to burn. He's a 4.6 running back, and he never did have that speed. The short area stuff is still there, and I do think that he is a good NFL running back for what he does. If he's going to get the catches and the targets, I think that could be where we see something left in the tank for him. But he's going to have to be efficient. He's going to have to get the targets, because he was getting nearly 4 targets a game in the first 5 games of the season last year, and then that evaporated before his injury. So he's not going to get a ton of the early down work. Isaiah Pacheco's going to get that. He's probably not getting any of the red zone work like he was early last year. It's going to have to be, are they going to save Jerick McKinnon for the playoffs like they like most people think they want to, because he is an older guy and they want to do that? Or is he just going to be the third man kind of out in this rotation? I think they want to try to trade him if they possibly can, but that would also mean he kind of has to get touches to be able to give you some trade value. So I still believe that he has talent. It left in the tank, something to give, but his body, is it going to hold up? Are they going to use him properly? All things to consider here.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, to me, I always saw him as a guy that he might, you know, in the right circumstance, he could give you 500, 700 yards rushing, but he could give you 700 to 900 yards receiving if you used him that way. And so the idea, and I guess that's why you could hear the Brian Westbrook comparisons to a degree, but Westbrook was a way better runner, if you ask me, between the tackles. But not that Edwards-Helaire was bad, but I think that the contact, he's a bully in the open field. His contact balance is there. Sure. You get him past the linebackers, and that's where you're going to see the contact balance. But, you know, decision maker, he was a good decision maker without a doubt. All right, so Josh McDaniels, we'll turn to the AFC West, the rest of the West here a little bit. Is he turning the Raiders' offense into a junkyard filled with Patriots refuse?
I mean, probably. That's all he knows. Like, it's the Patriot way, right? What do these guys know outside of the Patriots that leads to success? Mike Vrabel's the only guy that's been able to do it. And he does it his own way. He does it completely a little bit differently than McDaniels or Patricia or Judge or any of these guys. They don't have success. And I don't think, personally, I'll tell you right now, I don't think Josh McDaniels lasts the season in Las Vegas. I think he gets fired at some point this year, because they're going to be not just a junkyard with Patriots reviews. They're going to be a dumpster fire with some Patriots offshoots there. And then you're going to have somebody come in and be like, I don't want any of this. Granted, I like some of the pieces that they have. I thought they had a good draft, one of the best in the AFC West. I actually think they had the best draft out of the AFC West. They had more shots at it. But you have all of these weird problems, and you have the season hadn't even started, and Davante Adams is talking bad about their quarterback. I'm very confused. I'm very confused at what Josh McDaniels thinks he's doing, because everything that he should have learned in Denver is not transferring over to this. He doesn't really know how to run the team. How they traded for Davante Adams, and they were still bad. They were worse than they were the year before, and they didn't have Davante Adams. So then you trade away, Darren Waller. Yeah, you draft Michael Mayer, you bring in Austin Hooper. I mean, okay, I like Michael Mayer. He was the only tight end I had with a round 1 grade. And again, end of the first round for him. But you're hoping that Baby Gronk turns into Baby Gronk. But at the end of the day, you're not having Tom Brady throwing the football. You have Jimmy Garoppolo throwing him the football. I don't know. I don't know. It's a tough situation for Raiders fans, because I think that their defense is still going to be awful, and their offense looks like it's going to be even worse than it was last year. So it's tough. It's a tough situation. So I'm with you there.
Yeah, I'm going to look at this, and when you start bringing in Garoppolo and Philip Dorsett, that just kind of and then you bring your 2 tight ends in, and one of them is Hooper, who's he's okay. I mean, I think he's a competent pro. I just look at this and I think, what was Davante Adams going to be thinking? I mean, that was my first thought when they brought Garoppolo and it got rid of Carr, and I just thought, ooh, Adams came here specifically for Carr. Right. So what's happening here? So what are the are you feeling the idea of Adams staying in Vegas in the entire 2023, or do you think by like mid-season Adams will be somewhere else?
I think he should be somewhere else. He clearly, I don't think he wants to be there at all. I don't think he likes Josh McDaniels. I don't think he likes the fact that they traded away his best friend. The only reason he's even in, like I said, even in Vegas. And I do believe that they're going to be a pretty bad team. So they should probably be looking to trade him at some point. I would imagine by week 6. I think that you probably are going to have a good opportunity to try to trade him. Some team is going to want to look at him for contender wherever it's going to be. Maybe he reunites with his ex-quarterback in New York. Who knows? Yeah. Who knows what the Jets end up doing, because they just continue to want to bring in ex-Green Bay Packers in. Doesn't matter who it is. So, I do think that they should look to do that. And, I don't think he's happy at all. I would give it about a 40% chance that he stays with the Raiders this whole season.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much a done deal. I think that Josh, I've talked about this a lot on so many shows about Josh McDaniels having a history of alienating people. And I think that, they go, well, he worked well with Tom Brady. And I think it's because Tom Brady was the type of personality that literally would just get out there and yell at him and tell him, if McDaniels yelled at him, he would yell back at him and probably just go apeshit on him. and McDaniels, and they worked well together that way. I mean, some people have a good relationship where, it's volatile, in the workplace, but that kind of yelling, screaming, going after each other, they can forget about it when the game's over, and they can have a beer or just work productively and know that that's just part and parcel of the thing. But a lot of people aren't that way, and this looks like a disaster to me in the making, for sure. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Raiders end up getting the bad end of the deal, even when they do give Davante Adams up. Just be the way that's going to work. McDaniels was probably going to covet somebody that's like, not worth what they're giving up, and it'll be leading with the ego, and next thing you know, the Raiders will be talking in history about, remember so-and-so, and it'll be the key word for the story of, we gave up, we got this guy for, we got 3 magic beans for Davante Adams, and 2 of them were empty, and they're just the shell casing, so Yeah, it's going to be interesting with that. So what about the possibility? I just not that there's any rumors that I've heard, but
Yeah.
being a Browns fan, it doesn't look like Kareem Hunt's coming back to Cleveland. What do you think about the possibility of the Chiefs going? Yeah, sure. Let's have a return engagement with Kareem Hunt.
Yeah, personally, I'd love to see Kareem Hunt back in Kansas City. He not only would come in and be the best back in Kansas City, bar none, right away. He's better than anybody there. Tell you right now,
Yeah,
he is.
easily.
He could open up the offense. He really could, especially if he's back to, he had some injuries in Cleveland. If he could get back healthy, come in, he would be the best back and be able to. You could still lighten his load a little bit with Isaiah Pacheco. You could rotate them in and out because we know Kareem Hunt is always a better pass catching back than Isaiah Pacheco ever will be, and especially from a pass protection duty standpoint. But he's never going to be back in Kansas City, ever. I don't think that the Chiefs will ever forgive him for lying to their face. Like, this is something a lot of people don't know, is that back when the incident with Kareem Hunt happened in Kansas City, he was approached by Andy Reid in the organization, and they asked him point blank what happened. Okay? Point blank. And he lied to their face and said that nothing happened. And then the video came out of him kicking that woman.
Right.
Okay? Andy Reid is I think we all know, a very loyal person. And one of the big reasons, and I know that a lot of people don't like Tyreek Hill for everything that happened, being on the other side of that situation, I can tell you that Tyreek was very open with the organization through that process. He had all the information, and it turned out that he was not lying about a lot of things, and that his at the time girlfriend / fiance or / wife, whichever one it was, I can't remember at this point, was a very abusive person as well, and then things weren't going well in that relationship, and then it turns out, and lots of things went sideways. I won't derail this conversation with that because we'll get lots of people in the comments, but regardless, Kareem Hunt lied to their faces, and I don't think that he is going to be coming back based on that. Now, I am one for looking at what Kareem Hunt has done since he's kept his nose clean for everything that we know. And personally, I would be open to seeing him back in Kansas City, but I do believe that this organization holds grudges. Things, whether it end badly, ending badly, and they don't. The same reason I don't think Justin Houston will end his career in Kansas City, even though he probably should. I think he should. He should come back to Kansas City and be a rotational pass rusher and end his career here. Probably won't do that because of the way that it ended poorly between them before his time was up in Kansas City. So the feelings are very, I guess, they do hold their grudges pretty well in Kansas City. So I would say no, but I would love to see him back.
And I get it. And I think in the case of Kareem Hunt, at least, if you lie to Andy Reid or you lie to the organization, then I could see them just saying, "Yeah, we're done for good." And I think, and I see that as a smart decision from a management perspective, because if you give the guy another chance after they've lied, and you were going to be loyal to them through it and let them work their way through it, and because with Tyreek Hill, I mean, I'll just say this: regardless of the details of whether you, as an individual, whether you agree or disagree with the idea of employing people who've been dealing with or convicted of or charged with or involved in any kind of level of domestic violence, the point of the matter is that in this country, we certainly still there are people in corporate America all over the place employed for a variety of crimes, including domestic violence, and even had convictions and are still employed. So when you look at it from the standpoint of, look, whatever you feel about it, you're going to have to deal with people who are dealing with their own off-field stuff. How are you? What is it? What kind of standards are you going to have, knowing that you're still going to be working with people who have gone through these issues? And the biggest thing I could only think of is that if they're being honest with me about everything that's going on, and I know I can trust them moving forward, and that they were willing to be that upfront with me in the job interview, and that everything was confirmed through that, then we'll move forward and we'll take the hit. But if someone's who's been established is like not doing that, then I get that. I mean, about the best that they can do. So, how about Trey Lance? Before I ask this, after I asked this question, apparently the current thing is that Trey Lance is looking good. Clyde Christensen is saying, talking up his improvement with his skills. But obviously it's early. It's minicamp. We're not even on the field yet. I've been an admirer of Trey Lance's potential in game. I have not been an admirer of his landing spot because I'm a big believer that Kyle Shanahan is a system guy. Most West Coast guys are system guys, and Andy Reid's a good exception of that, where he'll take a talent and go, we'll work with that talent and figure it out. But most West Coast offensive guys from the Shanahan tree are more likely to be like, it's my system, and I want guys who execute the system, and I don't care whether they have high-end talent or mid-range talent. I'd rather have the mid-range talent who does everything I want him to do than the high-end talent who may veer a little bit from what goes there. And that may extend to the point of maybe the narcissistic kind of view of having your system being an extension of you, to the point that if you get a player who's not quite on board with the program, that you just write them off quickly. Mm-hmm. I think Mike was that way. I think Kyle learned it from Mike, and I think we see a little bit of that from him. So my thought is, I'm not feeling his future as an NFL starter in San Francisco as much as I would like that, but I am feeling his future as a starter down the line, as long as Kyle doesn't fuck with his head and bury him before it gets the shot. What about you?
That's right. That's all what this is all about, right? Does he completely get fucked up? Like this happens to a lot of young guys with lots of talent. They get completely destroyed by their landing spots, and then you see them years later. Yeah, this guy. People are still talking themselves into Sam Darnold. Funny enough, who is in San Francisco. Yeah. Like, the talent was always there with Sam Darnold, but guess what? He's one of the worst decision makers I think that has come out of college in recent memory. Yeah. Maybe even further back. He just doesn't know where to go with the football. Yeah. And times he locks in and he's like, I can make this throw. And he's like, yeah. And then he does make that throw. You're like, see, there's a talent, but he does not. Everything outside of right here is not within realm of possibilities for him. Pressure coming in, seeing all the dropping safeties, all of that kind of stuff. He doesn't really see any of that. So when you look at Brock Purdy versus Trey Lance, I think the big thing for me is that Purdy had the starts. Okay, he doesn't have the most talent, but guess what? He was at Iowa State for quite a while. He was a senior coming out too. He had a lot of starts. He had a lot of experience in making things happen and running a functioning offense. It wasn't the best all the time. His traits aren't always the best, but he typically is. You can point him in the right direction and say, do this, and if this doesn't happen, do this. If that doesn't there, you can run. Like, that's kind of how it feels to an extent with Brock Purdy. You point him in that direction, he can get that done. Obviously, brought up because of the weapons around him. Trey Lance is like you said, a little bit more of an undetermined factor with that. You not only have him coming up from NDSU, which is a very different offense, very different schematically. It's very, in the sense that they're run heavy, yes, but there's a lot of different fullback, a lot of more under center stuff. Like it feels a little different at NDSU than coming up to the NFL, not just jumping from like an SMU to the NFL. It's NDSU, which is a whole tier down, up 2 spots, learning a new offense. And you got hurt multiple times. So maybe your confidence isn't there either. Trey Lance, for me, I'm still a believer that he can be the starter in San Francisco. It's all about the experience learning in the offense. Last year should have been a very good opportunity for him to learn from Brock Purdy, who has more starts than Trey Lance does now. Even as a college player, he had more starts than Trey Lance ever had to this point. So at the very least, you can look at what he was able to do and try and operate the offense the same way, because we know, I don't think that Trey Lance is the type of runner that Jalen Hurts or a Justin Fields is. I think he's more of a tier down from those guys. He's really kind of more of a straight line. Like if you see a path here,
kind
okay,
of a
I'm
Josh
going.
Allen type,
Yeah,
in a
I
lot of
would say,
regards.
yeah, he's going to probably more bully somebody than just blow straight by them all the time,
Yeah.
or make a miss in open field. You're not going to see that ton of that from Trey Lance, but get the ball out, learn to speed the clock up a little bit. If everything with the mechanics that we're seeing is true, that will help the process, because a lot of times people think that he's just not getting the ball out quick enough because he's not seeing it. A lot of that time is because your mechanics are slow. Josh Allen was another one of those things. Like his mechanics were slower in his first couple of seasons. He reworked that. He did all the work, and it doesn't happen all that often where you see these guys take that leap. Like Josh Allen's an exception. You're hoping that Trey Lance can be that exception as well. If the ball can come out quicker, that will help your brain speed up as well. And I think that he'll be more comfortable being able to move through some of his reads. So I believe he could be the starter this year, because I think he's the most talented, good decision maker in San Francisco. But like you said, I don't know where his confidence is. I don't know what Kyle Shanahan is saying behind closed doors, because apparently they have 3 starting quarterbacks, and we don't know which one's going to be.
Yeah, it's a mess right now to try and figure that one out. We'll stay tuned with that soap opera. So what about the soap opera in Dallas? Dak Prescott rebound in 2023?
I'm feeling it. I am feeling a Dak Prescott rebound. And all of this is going back to trying to project Brian Schottenheimer, okay? Because, yes, Mike McCarthy is going to be installing more of an offense that he ran in Green Bay. But if you go back to when Brian Schottenheimer was last an offensive coordinator, he was the Seattle Seahawks coordinator from 2020 or 2018 to 2020. And Russell Wilson's finishes from a fantasy perspective from those 3 seasons, QB6, QB3, and QB9. And all the offenses that he ran in Seattle were this ground and pound run game, throw the ball down the field. And you look at what Dak Prescott is, he's a better pocket passer than Russell Wilson is. He doesn't always need the guardrails that Russell Wilson does, which we're going to get to later. And he can operate a little more off script than I think Russell Wilson can. I think he's a better runner now than Russell Wilson is in his career. And I do think that with the weapons around Dak Prescott, you have a huge array of weaponry, even though it's not necessarily the star power everyone wanted it to be with Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb. You still have your Brandon Cooks, who I think is going to have a very good season in Dallas, is going to be an excellent complementary piece to CeeDee Lamb, where CeeDee doesn't have to be the deep threat. He can do everything that he does well in winning short to intermediate and then the yak stuff. He doesn't have to be the deep threat that he kind of had to be forever in his career in Dallas. That Amari Cooper was the guy who was more of the winner, and he was the deep threat, the speed guy. CeeDee Lamb can go back to being like what Amari Cooper was. I think that you could see that very relatively happen this year. So I like the offense. If the offensive line continues to get better, as we saw kind of go towards the end of the season last year, get more comfortable. You have some young pieces. They're trying to to coach up and get into that space with Schottenheimer. I know Mike McCarthy's calling plays, but we know that even to an extent that Aaron Rodgers in that offense was still putting up a ton of numbers with Mike McCarthy calling plays. They just weren't winning playoff games. I don't care about that for fantasy. What I want to see is Dak Prescott getting out there and throwing the ball all over the place when they're able to hit those deep shots. He can regularly hit those. I think they'll be more comfortable. And I think that Brian Schottenheimer with Mike McCarthy can make an offense where Dak has a good amount of comfortability, that he's a little bit more innovative ability. Because I do think that for everything that Kellen Moore was, sometimes he would get into his own space and run the same kind of stuff over and over again, or get out of his head, where if it was working, he wouldn't go back to it. So I'm hoping that they see that in Dallas this year, and I believe he can have a rebound.
Yeah, I think we'll see. We may see more intermediate to deep shots in the middle of the field to guys like Cooks and Gallup, who I think if what Gallup is saying is true, that he feels, a little more explosive this year after coming back from the knee injury, and he's doing a little bit better there, that could be helpful. So what about, minicamp headlines? We hear things like, oh, Tank Bigsby looks amazing, running angle routes against linebackers. Or Samori Toure, could he be the starter in Green Bay because he's third on the depth chart? When we have unproven players that could be starters based on training camp performances or depth charts that show up early in training camp, Do you feel that, or are you just kind of like, look, it's a layer, and fuck the idea of like that's just a clickbait headline?
Man, I want to say that it's just a clickbait headline, but especially when it lines up with my priors, I just sometimes think we all buy in on some of these things. Like last year, for me, it was Jalen Tolbert. It was Jalen Tolbert because I believed in the South Alabama tape and the Senior Bowl tape. Watching him get open, watching him be a contested catch guy, looking at the depth chart, saying, hey, guess what? There's nobody in his way. There's nobody there. And then he's just like, I don't know how to read an offense. I don't know what I'm doing here. So, granted, I still have faith that he could be a better player this year. Yes, that's more depth chart because I don't believe in Michael Gallup. I don't believe in him. I don't think he's a good player. I know some people thought he was a really good guy, really good player. I don't see it. I never saw it with Michael Gallup. So I think that Tolbert could still feasibly find his way onto the field this year. But I do think we can take a lesson from most of these minicamp headlines and to say fuck it. Like just don't read into it. It's air. And a lot of these guys aren't playing against the starters even during OTAs. Most of them are voluntary OTAs, and the veterans are like, I don't give a fuck. I'm not coming here. Like I don't have to be here. I'm not putting that extra wear on my body. It's for these younger players who maybe don't know the offense and maybe don't know the defense to show up and get better at the NFL speed. OTAs, rookie minicamp, are an introduction. And kind of for me, the mini camps are just trying to introduce these guys to the speed of the NFL. Even to an extent, none of them have played at this speed, and your coaching staffs are here and saying, look, we're going to run this faster. We're going to do it differently. You're going to have to learn more at a higher speed and a faster rate than you ever have. Then you get to the OTAs where some of these veterans are going to be in here, and then you get to see what real speed looks like when they all know what they're supposed to be doing, and you have no fucking clue where you're supposed to be on the field. Yeah. So if you match up with some of these younger guys, like I would imagine we're probably going to hear some things about the wide receiver out of Nebraska.
Yeah, I know
Palmer, Trey Palmer in Tampa Bay, because I would imagine that they're going to look to maybe trade one of those guys, whether it's Chris Godwin or whether it's Mike Evans. I would think Mike Evans maybe. I don't know, man. It feels like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are punting on the season personally. To try and do something, because you have Baker Mayfield and Felipe Franks, if I'm not mistaken, is your like quarterback duo. I don't know.
Kyle Trask, I think, is still there.
Kyle Trask, you're right. Yeah. They run like the same style.
Yeah. I know. I feel you. I laugh because I looked at Tampa and I was like, ooh, that looks like a mess. They bring in Baker. You're like, oh, okay. But I love the points you're making, and it's true. It's like much less, not only just OTAs, but much less like late preseason when now the starting quarterback is relying on you to make the same reads as him in the offense. And can you do that? Can you make the late adjustment to the blitz for a blitz pickup as a running back? Can you do those are the things that matter and either help seasons or can kill a season with one hit. So it's a good point. So let's just quick question. I mean, you're a Missouri guy, and everyone who's outside Missouri thinks, okay, Kansas City. They think barbecue. They think burnt ends. They think Arthur Bryant. Sometimes if they're maybe older school, or Jack Stack. I've certainly seen that. I've been on the pleasant end of some Jack Stack for that. But what about the Z-Man sandwich? Is this a Kansas City icon as well? Is this something that people should know about? Have you had a Z-Man sandwich?
I've lived here for now 3 years. This is my third year living in Kansas City, and I've been to Joe's once. And I did not actually get the Z-Man because everyone talks about the Z-Man. Okay. And so for when I'm going to a new barbecue place in Kansas City, there are so many. There is such good barbecue here. I don't even think people understand the extent. I grew up in Michigan. Barbecue is not a thing in Michigan. It's not. You go there and everyone's like, here's a coney dog. That's about it. We all got Michigan. That's it.
Or Lebanese food,
Yeah, and my parents weren't, adventurous with food growing up. I didn't know most of what was happening, and then I moved to California when I graduated and joined the Air Force, and there's no barbecue in California either. Right. So you have to, and then I get here and I'm just like, this is this is great. This is amazing. So yes, I do think that it's a Kansas City icon. Most people will tell you to have it. I will tell you not to get like the thing everyone talks about. Typically, it's not going to live up to expectations, and there's also other great things to try. But also, I stood in line for an hour at Joe's when I went. I went with my daughter, and I didn't. It was a Saturday, like it was just starting to. The snow was starting to melt a little bit. The sun was out. Everybody was like, "No, we're going to Joe's." Apparently, and this was the original one, so it was part of the original gas station that they ran it out of. So yes, it's great barbecue. They have a ton of different barbecue sauces. I love barbecue sauce, all different kinds. People will argue, Kansas City versus like South Carolina. I don't care. Give me a sauce. Just spice it up a little bit. I don't care. But absolutely, the Z-Man's definitely a Kansas City icon. But there's so many things to try here. Don't if you're going to come into Kansas City and try some things, don't go for the most iconic thing. I think you'll probably like other things better.
Okay, good to know. So, my father lived in Colorado for almost 50 years. And there are a couple times I've had to make the drive from Atlanta to Colorado. And, hitting, there's pretty country in North Georgia and Tennessee. And then you get up into, Kentucky and Illinois and St. Louis, and all of that's kind of, there's some nice things to look at. And then you get past Kansas City and you get past the Chiefs Stadium. Missouri's not bad either. I've certainly, Missouri gets a little bit, gets a little flatter, more plains. You get the big sky. There's something nice about that. It's a nice welcome when you're coming from the east and you start to see that you're heading west. But then when you get past the Kansas City Chiefs Stadium and start heading west, am I wrong to say that it could literally be made a meaningful, like, punishment, like legal sentence by a court of law to make you drive through that state east to west or west to east? Because it is the most interminably boring drive I have ever made at least 4 or 5 times in my life.
I've driven through 3 states that I can say that about. And I hate it because I lived in Nebraska before the stop in Kansas City. Nebraska's one. Like it's one of them too. It's awful. It's awful. And I lived there, so I would go visit my parents in Michigan and drive across Nebraska, across Iowa. Iowa is another one. There is nothing in Iowa. It's just a plain strip of corn the entire way. So yes, Kansas is the other one. It's awful. Like we had to drive south through Kansas to get to Texas to visit my in-laws. That maybe 4 hours of that trip, it feels like the entire trip. It does. It is one of the most boring, like mentally draining.
Flat, gray or brown.
That's it.
Heavy wind and apocalyptic preachers on the radio. Like
There's
if
no
you were to
green.
even try and tune in to the radio for whatever reason,
Like the fact that there's no green, it's ridiculous. It's just gray and dead grass. It's yes, absolutely, and it should be made into a punishable sentence by a court of law. By those lesser people, like picking up garbage on the highway is great. Go drive through Kansas. You won't do that again.
Maybe we should send Josh McDaniels through Kansas and hope that he just never reports to the next team that he goes to. Maybe the Raiders should send him through there, and that might get rid of their problem. So, will there be a rookie tight end in 2023 who delivers at least 800 receiving yards and 5 scores?
Oh, that's a big old fuck it for me. You go back to 2015. 2015, this isn't even all that far back. Kyle Pitts is the only rookie tight end since that time to hit 800 plus yards in a season. That's it.
Yeah. And
He's the only one.
And before that, the last one was Mike Ditka.
So there you go. It's not exactly a great stretch. I know this tight end class. It's a very good class. Okay, tight ends are in a state of flux in the NFL right now. The teams are trying to figure out what best thing that they want. Look at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Look at them. They drafted Darnell Washington, who everyone was like, this dude's so athletic. Okay. Just go watch him play a few games in Georgia. Tell me how athletic he looks running routes and after the catch. He doesn't look that athletic to me. But you have Pat Freiermuth right there. Pat Freiermuth is one of the best young tight ends in the NFL, in my opinion.
Yep.
Do it all. Do it all tight end. He is like a Rob Gronkowski minus. Like, he's not going to physically admonish some guys like Rob Gronkowski could in his prime. He's a good blocker. He's a good route runner. He has great hands. He can do lots of different things after the catch. And then they draft this guy. Like, this is what NFL teams are doing right now. They're taking these tight ends and they're just kind of putting them into roles.
Yeah.
For example, the Green Bay Packers drafted 2 of them on day 2. They drafted Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave, who both don't block very well. I mean, Tucker Kraft is a better blocker, but at the end of the day, you're hoping that Luke Musgrave essentially turns into a slot receiver because he's not going to block for you. And, he also has trouble catching the football. He doesn't necessarily know how to track very well. So it kind of matches up with Christian Watson, who also does not know how to catch the ball very well and has tracking problems. So it's a very weird part of the tight end landscape we're in right now, where teams are like trying to draft these tight ends, like Dalton Kincaid going to Buffalo. Yeah, there's a lot of talk about slot for him. How often do you see tight ends just run out of the slot? It's more of an idealism. People think it as the ideal spot for some of these guys. Yeah, he's going to be the wide receiver too. Unless you're going to be playing like Travis Kelce, you're probably not going to have the overall offensive impact that you want. So while most people probably argue Dalton Kincaid can get to 800 receiving yards, I don't think he can. I don't think he will. And 5 scores, probably. I think he can get to 5 scores. But Dawson Knox is being paid a lot of money to play tight end for the Buffalo Bills. He's not just going to go away. He's not. So I don't know, man. It's a very weird. It feels like teams want 2 good tight ends on their roster that they can find ways to block and catch football and do whatever they need to. And the do-it-all tight ends that we see with Mark Andrews and Travis Kelce and George Kittle, and I think we're going to see a little bit more with TJ Hawkinson this year in Minnesota, are kind of going to the wayside a little bit right now.
Yeah, I mean, when I take a look at this, I will say, if I'm going to say that there are 2 potential options to do it, it will be Kincaid and Laporta. And mainly because the functions in their offense, and I do believe that maybe we'll see Kincaid replace more of what they hope to get out of Gabriel Davis, and just say we're not going to try and bomb it down the field as much, but we'll be willing to go quicker hitters on the 3rd read or the 2nd read and not have to manufacture as much out of Kincaid that we would have to do out of Davis. So I'm a little bit more on the side of like, maybe saying, I want you to send me a Z-Man sandwich if Dalton Kincaid gets the 8-5, because I'll take that end of the bet with him. But with that said, Laporta, we talked, just quick. We'll do some quick hitters here.
Yeah.
Lions earn primetime attention. A lot of games that are going to be in primetime. Is it because they're a legitimate playoff contender, or is it because they just play tough and they've had a lot of close games?
That's exactly what it is. They play tough, and people love talking about biting off kneecaps. Yeah. That's exactly what this is. They don't have star power. They don't. And I like Jared Goff. Jared Goff is fine. Jared Goff is a good NFL quarterback. He operated that offense to the peak. That's the thing here. We saw the Lions offense, in my opinion, peak last year, at the peak of what it could be. Yeah. You also now have to go 6 games without your deep threat. You bring in Marvin Jones, who is going to not give you as much as DJ Chark did last year.
Yep.
And you have to now use Sam Laporta, who's also a slot receiver, by the way, and Amon-Ra St. Brown in the same role. Okay, so you have overlapping role players. You don't have your deep threat for the first 6 games of the season because he got suspended from sports betting inside the Detroit Lions facility. These rules are very easily outlined, and yet he couldn't even wait to get outside the Detroit Lions facility. We got some mentalist stuff to figure out there. I love Jameson Williams. He was my wide receiver coming out that year. Wide receiver 1 coming out that year. I think he could be legitimately special. But, what do we got? And I don't know if the Lions defense is going to be any good.
Yeah,
Like, it was
yeah.
pretty terrible
They're
last
gonna
year.
need Amon-Ra St. Brown to really show up as a flanker. He's gonna have to be a great
Yes,
flanker
absolutely.
so that they can get what they get out of Laporta and maximize that and have enough binds. And Jones really is better as a flanker and a slot option than he is actually a
A
split
big slot,
end,
yeah.
especially at this
Yep.
stage of his career. So that is it is a fascinating look with them. I think it's totally that they just play hard. So Russell Wilson, mind you, you've got two people who hate Denver on the show probably. But Russ and I like Russell Wilson, but
Yeah.
Russell Wilson, does he rebound with Sean Payton at the helm?
Yes, yes, yes. I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it. I'm gonna drink the Kool-Aid once again. I drank it last year. I'm gonna drink it this year. And that's because Sean Payton gives you guardrails.
Yeah.
I listened to the Athletic Football Show podcast, and they were talking about, and Nate Tyson and Robert was talking about how Nathaniel Hackett was like, no, Russell, you want to run the offense? You run the offense. Looked like shit last year, didn't it?
Yeah.
Russell Wilson can't really do that at this point in his career. Sean Payton, for everything that people question about him, because he had Drew Brees, I think that he's an excellent, one of the best offensive minds that we've seen over the last however many years. You want to go 20, 30 years, he's up there. He's going to install guardrails for Russell Wilson, and they're going to get that offense back on track. Maybe not explosive like everyone expects it to be, on track, and I think that's a good place to start.
How about Austin Eckler? Does he stay in LA through 2023, or is he another guy that's going to be on the block and gone?
Yeah, if the Chargers were smart, they would use him the first 6 games of the season to their extent of the ability and trade him away. Get the most you can for him, otherwise you get nothing for him. I don't think they're very smart run organizations, so I think he stays to LA to 2023.
There you go. And the Chargers are the Chargers. That's always been the joke about them, is that's the quote, is the Chargers are being the Chargers. So I'm going to agree with that. Bengals, are they the most fearsome opponent in the postseason for Kansas City?
Right now, I'll say they are. I think the Bills have something against the Chiefs. Like, they do give them trouble, specifically offensively, because they can't really stop Josh Allen running the football as much. But I do think a dark horse team that will give them trouble this year would be the New England Patriots, and they could also do that in the postseason. But right now, I do lean Bengals because they match stylistically very well offensively with what the Chiefs typically struggle with in throwing the ball down the field with their shorter corners, and they're not, I wouldn't say shorter corners, excuse me, they're kind of big on the outside. More of the way that they stylistically play corner, where they don't necessarily get their head around to find the football at times, and we see T. Higgins and Jamar Chase dunk on them. So yes, I think that they are the most fearsome right now.
So do the Dolphins take another step forward toward becoming a legitimate contender in the AFC?
If Tua plays all year, yes. Because I do believe that he runs that offense exactly the way that it needs to be. And you saw the offense kind of take some weird turns last year where, he was not playing. Teddy Bridgewater was playing. Then you have Scott Thompson playing. So I think that if Tua plays all year, yeah, I think that they do take that next step.
Okay. And then would you say Jacksonville's offense is more dangerous than Miami?
Yes, it is. And that's the one reason is because it's more multiple. I think that Miami's offense is, we're fast and we're gonna do things the way we want to do them, and if they have to change, they're not very good at that.
Yeah, they'll dictate until they're told to stop.
Yeah, and I think that Doug Peterson is like, okay, well, we can change things on the fly, and they have a generational quarterback, in my opinion. I think he talent-wise, he's going to be everything you want some of these top quarterbacks to be, and he allows them to change stylistically from game to game. Doug Peterson's very good at game planning specifically for defenses and changing. That's what Andy Reid has been able to do. That's why Doug Peterson can do it, and that's why you see, I think that these guys that come out of Kansas City, for the most part, offensively can change stylistically.
Awesome. So, final question. We alluded to it a little bit with Darnell Washington, but now you get Hakeem Butler added to the mix. They've got Allen Robinson added to the mix. And Calvin Austin was an interesting guy to me.
Right?
Who I thought was the best of those shrimp receivers with speed that came out last year. Wandale and him and Khalil Pimpleton were all about like the same size, dimension type of guy with speed, similar speed and quickness too. But are there too many receivers and tight ends to figure out in Pittsburgh right now to say, who do we rely on outside of Deontay Johnson? And You know, who's the other guy I'm trying to think of that? Oh, Pickens. You know,
Pickens,
you got Pickens, him, Robinson, Pickens, Johnson, Robinson, Hakeem Butler, who they think they're hinting at will make the team. Austin,
Yes.
who's really fast and explosive, and might be better on the outside than they realize. And then you still have this whole Freiermuth Washington thing going on. What I mean, does Pittsburgh think that they're going to be able to line up 7 and still have 6 men on the line? I don't know.
That's what I'm thinking. Like Darnell Washington was he might just be a tackle. He might just be a tackle for them this year. I don't know. You know, I tweeted out that there's a good chance that there's an equally good chance that he becomes a great tackle, that he becomes a great tight end. I believe that to the full of my extent. If he completely made the switch, I think he could be a good tackle in the NFL. He's that good of a blocker. So I don't know how they see him, but I know Freiermuth is a really good tight end, Their wide receiver room is so weird. Like you bring in Hakeem Butler, who's younger than Allen Robinson, but Allen Robinson can't do anything anymore, in my opinion. I don't know why you bring him in. There's so many players here, and at the end of the day, do you trust their quarterback, Kenny Pickett, to get it everywhere? I don't. I think that Deontay Johnson's the only guy in that offense that I want any part of. I know that George Pickens may have a good chemistry, but I don't trust George Pickens. I don't know. I think that a lot of it is a splash in the pan. We'll see. But yes, I think that there are far too many tight ends and receivers to figure out what's going on. And it's kind of like they're trying to overcome Matt Canada's offense with trying to just throw as many bodies at the positions as they can.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be fascinating there, and the AFC is always a fascinating division. It's my favorite conference, for sure, and certainly, this was a fun show to be able to do. You can find Daniel on Twitter at InHarmsWay19 on Twitter. You can find him on the RGR podcast. Definitely check out the work that they do also on Twitter, with all the film reviews there. And you'll be seeing Daniel more often on the RSP cast this season. We'll be doing some different work, and I've got some announcements coming up soon with someone else that we'll be talking about. I'll be doing some shows with, and we'll be doing that fairly soon. So stay tuned. Thanks for listening, everybody. Again, you can get your rookie scouting portfolio at mattwaldman.com. For those of you who are waiting on projections, as I've mentioned, when they go up for sale, that the projections dynasty rankings, complete rankings of all the players, long build and short build, the first update will be in the first week of June. So I'm working on that. I'm about halfway through the projections right now that I've been working on. So we're right on schedule. Thanks again, and talk to you later.